I'm calling this the how to get very rich and not be a miserable framework. So I've made friends with some billionaires, and as I started talking with them, one of the things that I found overall across the board that they think makes them non-miserable is staying in the game. If you're not a real entrepreneur, if you've never been in the dark, head held in your hands in the middle of the night, wondering what to do next. And so when those moments happen, I remember, well, there's gonna be a bunch of people that will root for my failure when they see that. And then there's gonna be a very few amount of humans that will be there with me no matter what. One of the biggest hacks is you go and you audience jack. You would just be the first one to comment on a bunch of platforms and get a big creator like me to engage with you. And if you do that enough in a way that's positive, you're just gonna have that creator like recognize your name, they're gonna comment back, and you're gonna be able to steal their audience and attention.
Our next speaker is gonna be someone I'm gonna sit down with and chat with for a few minutes, really looking forward to it. And actually first met her when she was working in shockingly, the cannabis industry. Codie, people are laughing because we've had like 3 or 4 cannabis speakers so far this morning. It's kind of the criteria for speaking at this event. But she was working at a private equity company in the cannabis space. And I think it was like 11:30 p.m. in New Orleans at the end of ECF Live. There's a bunch of people having like a very casual, one of our traditions, a lot of times we'll get together super late in the hotel lobby of ECF Live and try to make as much noise as possible and consume as many pizzas as possible as the tradition. So we started talking about e-commerce and things like that. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. And since then, she's pivoted into what I would call the media business and has built up a really impressive personal brand and media company across all of the platforms. She's, I think, built her following up to 5 million followers across all the platforms, email lists of about 500,000 or 600,000 people, and really built an incredible platform and voice to be able to talk to people. And I think that's so much of what is happening with acquisition today is it's different, it's harder. Having a point of view is so important, and it's much more challenging than it was. I think it's really cool what she's done. So. Her company, Codie Sanchez is her name, of course, and she is the one behind Contrarian Thinking, where she puts out a newsletter, invests in businesses, and again, has a pretty impressive media platform. So gonna sit down with her and talk about a bunch of different things. So if you could please help me welcome Codie up to the stage. Do you remember, did I get that right the first time we met on for the pizza parties?
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I had invested in a CPG company that we had owned a large stake of, and it was failing miserably. And we were talking about it, and I was like, well, this is why I don't do e-com CPG anymore. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's even why I joined e-commerce Fuel.
Yeah. And then you've come full circle, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, you have built an amazing business. I want to talk about something that, like, we have a crew here that we're in Austin, in this super like hustle city. Everyone here is an entrepreneur. I was talking to an entrepreneur just like 5 days ago. They sold their business for an unholy amount of money, like hard to spend in a lifetime amount of money. And then their whole life just imploded, right? Like their marriage fell apart, their health fell apart, like they didn't have any friendships left. And when we were talking about this kind of beforehand, we were talking about how so many people get caught up in that, right? And that's one of the things, like for me, as I get further along in this game, I'm less interested in like building a great business, although I still think it's super cool. That's the DNA of all of us here. And more so about how do you build a life that you don't like, that you're excited about on your deathbed, because those oftentimes like, anyway, this is important to you. You talk about this. You've been doing some research into billionaires and like how some of them are like some of the most miserable people in the world. Yeah. So talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, we had a late night conversation on this once. So I'm calling this the how to get very rich and not be a miserable framework. Workshopping the title. And I guess it started because I actually grew up like traditionally really corporate, right? So Goldman Sachs, State Street, Vanguard, built a big business in Latin America. We met after I had left sort of corporate and bought into part of a private equity firm and was a partner at a PE firm, and I did 2 funds and then I left. That was in the cannabis space after most in Latin America. And I kind of left finance, one, because, was anybody here in finance ever? How awesome was it? Not that awesome. if you ever talk to anybody in finance, like you just want to get out, basically. And one of the reasons that I wanted to get out is I looked, I kept climbing varying ladders, and I would look who was above me and think, I don't want to be that. Like I have no interest in becoming that. And so I thought, well, maybe it was this firm, maybe it was that firm, maybe it was this asset class, maybe it was that asset class, and maybe when I run my own private equity fund, it'll be a different thing. And it turned out like none of those things were true. And I just didn't like the litigious nature of private equity, and I didn't like some of the people who made their entire pursuit money and nothing else. I think that's it's a pathway to be a very rich, miserable fuck. And so I started actually talking about contrarian thinking in our company, which is now a newsletter, plus we have a holding company that does about $100 million a year in like what I call boring businesses. And while I was doing that, I started getting reached out to by some billionaires, because it turns out that when you make a lot of money in typically tech or finance, you don't ever want to do VC again, right? You don't ever want to do tech again, and they only want cash flowing businesses. It's a weird thing that I've seen. So I've made friends with some billionaires, and as I started talking with them, one of the things that I found overall across the board that they think makes them non-miserable is staying in the game. And so I have not yet met one billionaire who just stops working. And I'm sure you guys can relate with that. Like, how many of you guys could retire right now if you wanted to? I bet there's quite a few. Okay, so that's everybody's me. There's 15% I can see in the audience right now that could probably retire right now if you wanted to. But you keep going. And I think when you're the 75 or 80% that's not there yet, you think as soon as I hit X dollar amount, I'm going to be happy. But that's actually very rarely the case. And so what I think makes life interesting is, one, you stay in the game, and then two, you teach people what you've learned in the game. And that's what you've done. People always ask me all the time, why are you on the internet? If you actually did all this fucking stuff, you wouldn't be talking about it on the internet. And I'm always like, what else am I going to do? I'm going to continue to just make money for myself nonstop. It's kind of non-interesting. And the only thing that I think gives people real value once you've hit your financial freedom number is paying it forward. It's we just want to be needed, and we want people to think that we have something worthy of sharing. And so one of the things that is our mission at Contrarian Thinking is we want to push back on this idea that the few own everything. I could just go build another big private equity firm and raise a couple more $100 million and try to go after a KKR or a BlackRock or be my own little version of it. But I realized it's not that interesting. What I'd way rather see is a bunch of people own lots of stuff. And so I figured out what was this mission thing that was useful for me or interesting for me, and then I poured into it. And one of the reasons I always agree to come speak to stuff like this is I hope you guys who this is a room of, what's the qualifiers? It's $1 million in revenue?
$1 million to be a member, and then for this group, I think the average revenue is about $5 million, and the median is about $5 million, and average is about 10. So.
So you guys are so rare. 90% of startups fail, right? Only 40% of startups ever hit the 100K mark. I can't remember what the number is that hits $1 million in revenue, but it's single digits, if not low double digits. So you guys are, do you know what the number is?
7%.
7%. Okay, so 7% actually hit $1 million, and then God, so you have to assume what, 5 or 10 is 1%? Maybe less than that? And so if all this room does is we keep making a bunch of money for ourselves, that's fine. But I think it'd be a lot more interesting. We'd probably have less division in our country if we paid it forward a little bit. And so we're going to talk about a personal brand. I'm happy to answer any questions. I've always found it interesting that this group, probably because of you, Andrew's really humble, is much less ego-driven than a lot of groups I've spoken to. And so a lot of people in here are you couldn't pay me to have a personal brand. Do a few people in here feel like that? No fucking thanks. Yeah, I feel ya. And what I would say to that is you don't have to have a personal brand, but I do hope that you do something like Andrew does, which is bring along a few other humans. Because if not, does anybody feel like where we're at in a country right now is a really good thing? Do you feel like we're super happy? There's no polarization. November next year is going to be awesome? No. And so the only, nobody's coming to save us. It's just us. And so one of my favorite mentors is this guy by the name of Andy Frisella, who comes off on the internet as sort of intense and very one-way politically, but has built First Form, e-commerce company, into a multi-billion-dollar a year company. You guys would be fucking flabbergasted by how big that company is. And that motherfucker owns the whole thing. And he built that company totally mission-driven, and now helps other people. He even has a mastermind group. Think about this. The guy does almost $1 billion in sales, if not $1 billion in sales, and he teaches other people. And he really inspired me to do the same. So I hope you guys do as well. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Really appreciate it.
One thing I've always respected about you is you'll take positions that aren't necessarily popular. Like, you're very outspoken with what you think, and you kind of take hard stands on things. And I think whether or not people agree with you or disagree with you, and obviously there's limits to that. You know, you can go crazy. You're not, but that's scary to do. But like, I think that's one of the reasons would you say that's one of the reasons why you've actually resonated? You think you've been able to build an audience? Like, you feel like you have something to say that is not just kind of, it actually stands for something?
Yeah. I mean, you guys know, you got lots of people in the PPC game spending money on ads, right? Which ad is better? This was a real subject line email thing that we did. So a bunch of my teams from one of our newsletters got together and they were writing something. I thought their subject lines were really bad lately. So I was like, I'm going to pay whoever has the best A/B tested subject line $1,000, but I'm going to beat all of you guys. And if I win, you owe me $1,000. Who wants to take the bet? And so a few of them took a bet. And they came up. It was an article on like land. No, it was tree trimming. Their article was on like a tree trimming business that this guy made X and Y and Z a year. And so those motherfuckers put it in ChatGPT, 62 ways from Sunday, and came up with all these options. And the options were like, he made X doing Y. He chopped trees and this happened, right? Then my subject line was, I love guys with wood, ... Which one won? Mine. If you are going to do ads that work, if you're going to do content that works, if you're going to have an impact on humans, it's such an old school adage, but it's what Maya Angelou said, which is people are going to forget what you said, but they're going to remember the way you made them feel. And I remember the first time I heard this as a finance pro, I was like, yuck. And then once I got into a world where people actually market stuff online, I realized that's absolutely true. And so I don't try to take controversial stances to get clicks, because I think that can really backfire and then you become kind of a weirdo. But I do try to make people feel something one way or the other, because that's the only way you're going to be memorable. And so if it's a fun game to try with your team, you all have like such innate knowledge just from doing as many ads as you've done, from looking at as many e-com products that are highly competitive as you have the ability to make a human feel something one way or the other. I imagine otherwise you're not doing 5 or 10 mil a year. And so if you can apply that to your personal brand, to your marketing, to everything you do, you'll be really successful. And the last thing I'll say is I sucked at this for a long time because I was not on the internet until 2020. I mean, I made all my money in private equity where every tweet that I sent had to get pre-approved. They track your tweets and all of your social accounts. I couldn't even have a Twitter, actually. I had a LinkedIn. And they had to connect it because they have to save all of your tweets for 7 years with the SEC. And so I wasn't even on the internet. And then when I started getting on the internet, I realized that most people don't have subject matter expertise and then pair that with being public. Most people become public and then try to say they have subject matter expertise. And if you all in this room already have done $5 or $10 million, you already have something unique that most humans don't have. And so we need more people like you on the internet, because you're going to have a bunch of yahoos that pretend they know what they're talking about on the internet. And the internet hates a vacuum, and so I'd rather you guys were there than that.
What do you do? I mean, so many people here I feel like there's this curse of entrepreneurship where the people that are able to build businesses that let them do what they want to or pick what they work on are sometimes the people that are least available to like relax, chill out, and be able to take advantage of that freedom, or like just not work crazy amounts or fill work for work's sake, right? Yeah. And it's this double-edged sword that I think is really hard. How do you, like in your life, how do you think about, because you're pushing hard, like you have big ambition, you're doing a lot of stuff, but I also know like your relationships are important to you, your health is important to you. Yeah. What are the things that you do to try to create those times? Because I think very few people are able to get that. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really deeply interested in, is how do you walk that tightrope? Yeah.
Well, I've known my husband since I was 11 years old, which is wild. And we've been married for 6 years. And I'm a terrible work-life balancer. I'm the worst. You shouldn't talk to me about that. I have no interest in PTAs or country clubs or vacation, largely. But I am really interested in partnerships and human relationships. And so because I'm more quantitative, I just stack rank the things that matter to me, and then I make sure that the time that I spend is actually correct to the priorities that I have. And so because I think that one of the worst things in the world would be to die with a bucket full of money by yourself and nobody cares, I stack rank relationships. And so, my husband is my top relationship, and our family is our top relationship. And I know, because I was divorced before, that I lost a lot of money on that divorce, like millions of dollars. And I don't ever want to go through that again. And I also hold part of the blame for that. It was a two-sided agreement. I said yes to forever, and then both of us said no. And so I take that really serious because I know what the pain looks like there. So I stack rank the priorities. And then the second thing I found is building is so lonely. My dad has this incredible line, which is, if you're not a real entrepreneur if you've never been in the dark, head held in your hands in the middle of the night, wondering what to do next. Have all of you felt that? I don't think you get to 5 or 10 million in revenue without a night of, oh my fucking God, everybody's going to find out. They're going to find out I'm a loser. This whole business is nothing. It's going to fail. I won't be able to make payroll. All of us have some moment, whether it's us projecting forward or actual reality. And so when those moments happen, I remember, there's going to be a bunch of people that will root for my failure when they see that. And then there's going to be a very few amount of humans that will be there with me no matter what. And Chris, my husband, and I, we always joke about it. We call it our who will hide me list. And we thought about this in 2020 because we had some opinions that maybe weren't normalized. And so we were joking about who would hide us? If the world goes crazy and they disagree with our opinions, who would hide us and who would we hide? And it also just helped with the stack ranking. I was like, this human has the self-confidence and the courage to choose sides. And that is often how I determine who steps into my life. And then the other thing I'd say is, when I was young, I lost a sister. So she died about a year after she was born, and I was quite young when that happened. And I remember, not having birthdays for a while, and I remember no Christmases, and my parents made it through that period of time. But it kind of stuck somewhere in the back of my subconscious that we prioritize health hugely, because my husband went to war multiple times. He was in the military. I saw death from a really young age and felt what that might feel like if it happened again. And then we really think about the worst case scenario. And so if you just play that into your life a little bit more, it becomes a lot easier to ignore the idiots, ignore the noise, and instead focus on the stuff that really matters. And I'm not part of the crowd that's financial freedom so that you can own a bunch of houses and cars. I got nothing against that. I think you should do whatever you want with your money, and more power to you. But I think at some point it starts to feel shallow, and what actually matters is your impact, how you feel, the humans that surround yourself, and would they actually be there if you were dying?
Yeah, I was taking an Uber a week ago and started talking with the Uber driver and talked about property taxes. He's like, property taxes are expensive. And I said, I was kind of commiserating with him. He's like, but it's not so bad because my house is paid for. And I kind of perked up a little bit because not that many people have a paid for house. He was probably late 30s. Wow. And he's driving an Uber. And so I asked him a little more about that. And I was like, oh, wow, tell me the story about that, right? And anyway, it turns out, grew up in Mexico, no electricity till he was 12, came to the United States, spent the last 15 of the last 20 years, 16 of the last 20 years working 50 to 70 hours a week. And I was like, oh man, what was that like? He was like, it was really hard. I gave up a ton of stuff. And I was like, anyway, he paid his house off 3 or 4 years ago. And I was like, so what now? And he's like, oh, it's great. I take my kids to school every day. I see my wife a bunch. I work 30, 32 hours a week. And I was like, this dude has more freedom and more probably relational depth and happiness than 90% of America. Yeah. And I was just like, we need more Americans. I was really impressed. Yeah.
Oh, I love that story.
It was really cool.
I also like to hire immigrants, but usually we work the opposite amount of that. We have that at any moment we could be poor again thing in the back of our mind.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, hands up here if you worry at least once a week about your business totally crashing and burning and falling to shreds. Right? Like, I think it's just hardwired, and this is kind of the curse of the entrepreneur a little bit. Because like, if you don't worry about that, and you're the guy or the girl who just like takes off and heads to Costa Rica for like 3 years, you come back, it's gonna be in flames. So like, this is a self-preservation thing to some degree, but also, you're awake at like 2 a.m. when it does you no good. And I will say, like last year, I went through at like kind of a really hard time, worrying about the business, like stressful. And one, it like breaks you down. It's so hard. And two, to your point about people, like there was probably 12 people, a good number of people that reached out personally, and they're just like, hey, I see you, I'm here for you. And that means so much when you're going through that. So for me, it was a good reminder, like when you see people that are going through stuff, like even if they're going through stuff that you're like, wow, they brought that on themselves, or wow, they made a terrible decision and it's coming to them. Like just reaching out and just being like, hey, I'm here for you. Like I'm going through this with you. Like it means an insane amount to people. So anyway, there's my TED Talk.
No, it's good. I think everybody needs that.
I want to do kind of a weird right turn, personal, like executive coaching. So you hired somebody recently for a coach. How many people here have a coach or have used like a business executive coach in the past? Keep your hands up, everyone. Keep your hands up if you felt like it was a really good use of time and money. Yeah. Wow, I didn't see any hands go down, which is, maybe one. Still a pretty good hit right there. So you made a video about it, and it was, I don't know, you spend like significant investment, 6-figure investment for the coach. What do you learn from them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I still pay him $10K every month. I think it's the best money I've ever spent. And I used to think that any type of coaching was like so odd that anybody would do that and makes no sense. And if you would have told me that I would have spent $10K on a business coach, I wouldn't have believed myself 2 years ago. And that doesn't even matter how much money I make. Just any sort of like 5 figures, 6 figures for somebody to tell me, like therapy me on my business just sounded bizarre. But I'm now a complete believer in buying somebody's 10,000 hours. I'm a complete believer. And I actually think everybody in this room is, because you read books for that reason, you listen to podcasts for that reason. But think about how much combing through the noise you have to take or you have to do in order to get the one thing. You listen to 2 hours of Tim Ferriss, and in it, there's like 2 portions of it that you apply to your business, but you also forget because you were running while you were listening to the podcast, right? That's how we normally value our time. We disregard our time so highly that we allow 2 hours to get 2 nuggets. Why wouldn't I instead, if I'm making 6 figures, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, why wouldn't I spend something that has a huge ROI and I can just, in 60 minutes, only get the 60 things that I want to talk about? And so I think it actually happened. I met Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan and Kobe's coach. And I listened to his books, Relentless and Winning, and I wasn't really sure what I thought. And then I started talking to him and some of the people that he coached, and I realized, that amount of time that he specifically gave to those athletes led to outsized returns because, one, he's unbiased. He's not in their business. He's not getting paid direct in the business, so he can actually look from a high-level view. 2, he had already had 10,000 hours from working with a ton of athletes. So right now, the guy I use today, his name's Jordan, and I met him because I was coming out of finance. I had never done media before. I became friends with Sam Parr, who used to run The Hustle. It has something called MFM, a podcast, if you guys have heard of it. And I met him. We became friends. He told me how to grow this media business. I was like, that's cool. And then I said, Sam, you give me a lot of answers that are like up here. Who's the guy that actually executes on the decisions day to day? And he was like, this guy. And I was like, well, can I just pay him on the side, because you've already sold your company, to help me while he's working for a big conglomerate? And he's like, yeah, I don't see why. It wouldn't hurt my feelings. So I did that. And now I do that across multiple areas of the business. And in fact, all of our team members get a quarterly allocation to go find their who. And so, Tanner and Lindsay, who are here, will tell you how annoying I am in every single business that I run. People will be like, well, what do you think about this decision? I'm like, why are you asking me? I don't know anything about growing newsletters. Find the who and pay for their hours. Like, we were having a problem in one business where it wasn't being financed the right way, and we wanted to do kind of a complex transaction. I'm like, I haven't done this type of transaction before. Go on GLG, look right now, and find a couple people. You got a budget of 10K. Find like 4 or 5 people, pay them to get us the answer to this question. Somebody's already done this before. Let's just steal their homework. So I think we need to do that a lot more often.
What was the platform you said? GLG?
GLG. Yeah, when I was at Goldman, Jesse Puggi talks about this too, if you know him. But when I was at Goldman, I don't know if GLG existed then, but they have big financial firms have unlimited budgets for experts. And so they actually do subscriptions to something called GLG and there's another one called Intro or Get Intro, something like that. And basically you can go on there. I just booked one with the CEO of Zillow like 3 weeks from now because I'm working on a marketplace that we bought. And I'm like, well, I bet this guy knows a thing or two about building marketplaces. Why wouldn't I just go ask him before I hire it? So I would highly recommend you. It's not only that you guys should get a coach. I get 2 hours a week from Jordan. One of the hours I take. One of the other hours, my other senior leaders at the company get to decide between them who has the highest ROI for his time. And so it's an easy way to scale expertise.
I want to talk about media.
Yeah.
You've built an amazing media business. Do you consider it a media business?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, It's an amazing media business. When you look out at the media landscape and just the attention landscape right now, how do you see it evolving and how is that impacting how you are building this business?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One, I think you all are in a good place, and it's the same thing that I think about, which is, if you ask Sam Parr too, I think running a pure media business where that is your sole income stream in one way or the other is actually hard. I hate ads-based businesses where you have to go out and get sponsorships or ads. We largely don't do that. We do some partnerships. I don't like a business that is only driven by our attention that we get from our audience. So that's not how our business is. We have a bunch of businesses you'll never see me talk about on the internet that I couldn't even try to get more car wash users, I don't think, if I wanted to, in some of my small towns from my media empire. It's only downside. So I would say it's really cool what you already have because PPC and ads, even though you have a lot of problems like this, they're slightly more controllable than organic content is. So I think that's good. The second thing that I also have found is that there is no greater leverage point in today's economy that is democratized than attention. If I want to go get more capital, I got to raise from people, aka get permission. I got to go to a bank, aka get permission. If I want to get more employees, I got to hire them, I got to find them. But if I want more attention, I can just create viral content, and that content can be seen by a ton of people, and I don't need anybody's permission to do it. And so that's why we focus a lot on that segment of the business, because I think we're building 2 or 3 companies right now that we've funded that I think with our media attention, we have such an unfair advantage. We are going to blow industry incumbents out of the way, and that would never happen if I hadn't built the media business.
Yeah, a huge spotlight to accelerate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people in here, I think, a lot of experience with paid traffic, not as much experience on the content side and the social side. Let's take someone here. Let's say somebody came up to you and said, hey, I have $100,000 budget for this per year. I am willing to go out or the talent, whoever it is that's going to be in front of the camera the most, is willing to commit 15 to 20 hours a week of doing this. So that much man or woman power, that much budget. How would you recommend starting? Because I think that's a lot for people. What's the playbook here to start that flywheel and get going? Because there's so many platforms out there, right?
Yeah.
You can spread yourself too thin.
Yep.
What would you say in that case for that level of investment for somebody?
Well, let me give you a couple hacks, and then let me think through what my step-by-step would be. One of the biggest hacks is you go and you audience jack, right? So you guys already know I'm big on a bunch of platforms. You would just be the first one to comment on a bunch of platforms and get a big creator like me to engage with you. And if you do that enough in a way that's positive, you're just going to have that creator recognize your name. They're going to comment back, and you're going to be able to steal their audience and attention. And so, we have a bunch of people. That's kind of funny. I've said this a few times, but I only think I've said it on LinkedIn. And so we'll have some people that every single time they'll be some of the first commenters because they know, well, we'll engage back with you. A bunch of people will see this, and you can kind of draft off somebody else's growth. So that's one. I think that works really well on Twitter too. Two, if you're going to put spend behind it, it's really no different than any other business unit. Like, what do you do first? Before you spend $100,000, you go, what's my goal? What are my KPIs? What's my timeline? And who is going to be tasked with this? And so I usually start with who, which means if I have 100K, I'm going to allocate most of that budget, not to tactics, but to a person that's already done it. So, if you, and typically, like, the bigger the better. So you might want to go and say, all right, I'm going to spend actually the full 100K this year on hiring the best content person from Gary Vee's company, because he's been an OG doing this forever, because I want to do video content. Or I'm going to go spend 100K and take it from the biggest Twitter account that I can find. So I'm a little bit lazy because we run a lot of businesses. You guys probably don't either. I never have time to do the tactics myself. I'm always hiring first, and then I'm backfilling the topics. The only thing I will say, though, is if you're going to do this, the only experience I have with it, I can't actually think of a time where somebody funded a creator and that worked. I don't know if you guys have. I literally can't think of one. I can think of one where they found somebody who was already kind of crushing it, and then they tried to put them in a deal where the creator didn't quite realize how much they were going to crush it, and then they were able to accelerate that creator. Dave Portnoy's good at that with Barstool, for instance. But for the most part, that's really hard to do, and also creators are a pain in the ass to deal with. You guys know this. You've worked with influencers before. I worked with influencers before. I had a company I sold just because I hated influencers so much in the fashion marketing place. And so if you're going to do it, I think it largely has to be you, or maybe you could get away with it being an employee of your company, but you'd want to own their time 100%, and you'd want to be ready for the fact that once they get attention, what are they going to do? You're going to renegotiate the terms. And so I would probably put it more behind you. Maybe last thing, pick your platform to start. I think Twitter's the easiest. There's a good and bad part to that. A lot of people can play on Twitter. Like, there's a ton of people on, like, this is great. Tanner's tired of hearing me talk about this story. I had a guy that literally became friends with us, like reverse engineered becoming friends with me and my husband, targeted us. Did I tell you this already?
No.
Targeted us, got me, my fault, but we ended up investing about $200K buying a business that he wanted us to buy, that he was going to run for us. Became really close with my husband. They're running the deal. We have a lot of businesses, so it gets tracked, but I start noticing like some anomalies in the numbers, and I'm like, this is weird. So I send my chief investment officer, and I'm like, can you go figure this out? All of a sudden, the guy who is like best buds with us, best buds, like I've held his kid, ghosts me. Won't respond. What is he doing? He's on fucking Twitter. The truth about being in business is it's really hard. As he's ghosting me, and I invested $200K on this guy. And anyway, moral of the story, con man, steals the $200K. Now this motherfucker's all over Twitter talking about how smart he is and like shit talking all over the place. So there are some downsides to getting big, which is the bigger you are, the more people are going to target you, and people who throw rocks don't realize they can build with them. And so I think the best way to determine if somebody's actually successful or not is to look at what their Twitter comments are or their Twitter replies are. And I would have caught it. I would have seen that this guy had like a consistent experience with that. And so I think that's one of the hard parts about being big. I think if you pour into smaller creators or operators and they at all become a friend, you have to realize that at some point the tables are going to turn and it's just not going to be good.
What? You talked about who, right? And with your coach, you focus on who, bringing people in. Can you give like very specific anecdotes? Like for YouTube, for example, when you started doing YouTube stuff, did you go find someone, bring them in-house, or did you use an agency for that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, how are you thinking about that? Because so many people have bad experiences with agencies, and rightfully so, because there's a lot of bad ones out there.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to quickly iterate, especially if you want to build a broad platform, like going out and hiring somebody for YouTube and for Twitter and for Instagram, because to really do them really well, you can't just, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't just film something and just smash it out on all the platforms. You got to customize it and tweak it. So how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to first start, every time I do start, I guess I go to consultant, because that's what I did with YouTube too. Yeah. I reached out to this guy by the name of Jamie. and he had run a channel. And so I just said, hey, can I pay for an hour of your time? And then he was good, so I paid for a few more hours of his time, and he taught my marketing team. I just started turning my marketing team from one business into my content team, and he taught them how to do it. Every quarter, we re-up with some YouTube strategist, some Twitter strategist, some LinkedIn strategist. Just like every quarter, I have my finance team, and I have my ops team, and whatever, re-up with a consultant. So I would say go to a consultant first. Also, you're going to have to get your hands a little bit dirty, I think, to do content well. I really think if you want to do this, like, be honest about the fact that you need to spend some time sharing your 5 to 10 million story. And then one thing I'm really bad at, actually, that people who are quite big on the internet are good at, is like telling their come up story. I always kind of, like, it happens and I'm like, yeah, we did that. You know, my team's like, I didn't even know you had a business that was $1 billion in AUM in Latin America. So, like, how many of you guys wish you had more pictures from, like, when you were in your garage and you hadn't actually built your business yet? Like, everybody, right? And we're builders, so we don't even think to do it. And then I'm older, so I realized, like, I wasn't even taking pictures back then, you know? And so keep your come-up stories. Those make great content. Get a consultant every time per platform. Share the lessons and document what you're doing live as opposed to create content. I think the best content for business is always, like, you in the game. What are you doing right now? Every time my team brings me something that's like, do this cool trend or whatever, one, I hate it. And two, it just doesn't do as well. Because people, how cool would that be if when we were young, people were sharing, like, what if you could get Elon Musk or you could get Jeff Bezos to tell you their come-up story as they were making their first mil, 10, 15, 20, 25? Like, that would have been incredible. And you guys can be that same thing.
Going to get really nerdy here.
Tell me.
Tanner, right? Hey, Tanner. So you got Tanner over here. He's part of your team. He's filming all this stuff.
We call him Pipes.
Pipes? Yeah, I can see why.
Uh-huh.
So how is it? So Tanner's filming this stuff. What happens? Because you think about repurposing content. Mm-hmm. You want to repurpose as much as you can in a way that doesn't just look like you just, you know, it's super ugly copy and paste from Twitter and Instagram or something. Mm-hmm. You want to repurpose as much as you can. Take me through, if you would, like, what's going to happen to this footage right now, and how is that going to kind of flow throughout not only just all the platforms, but be super geeky. What team members or agencies does it go to? How does it get split up? How does it get repurposed? Like, what's that whole process?
Yeah, well, I bought part of a company called Viral Cuts. Because Viral Cuts did some of our short form video editing. And I was like, well, why don't I just own that liability, turn it into an asset? So Viral Cuts takes a lot of our short form content, we'll actually pretty it up, turn it into a video, and post it a lot of places. Stuff like this probably gets turned into YouTube because unlike a lot of creators, we only film, you know, we didn't film for 3 months this summer. We film 1 day a week max. Unless we have stuff like this, then Tanner comes with me or the team comes with me because we're actually running the businesses. And so it'll go to Viral Cuts. It'll go to our short form editing team. It'll go to a YouTube team.
Sorry to interrupt. Those teams, are those in-house or those agencies?
Viral Cuts is an agency. Yeah. The other ones are in-house.
Okay.
I would not recommend you do all of that at first. I mean, we spend a lot of money a month on running the media business side. In the beginning, I think you probably need, like, well, when I first did it, I reached out to another friend, Noah Kagan, and I was like, you do video internet stuff. I'm like, who's your video internet shooter guy? And I'm like, can I use him for 2 hours a week? So I used him for 2 hours a week. And then I was like, do you have a friend that edits some video? And he's like, yep. And I probably started with like a couple $1,000, and they'd really just like followed me around whatever I was doing business-wise. You guys could do that same thing. You could probably kick this off with like $2,000 going to an editor, going to a videographer a month for them to film your stuff. And then somebody like Viral Cuts, or if you want to hire a full-time person, or some other agency for like $3,000 to $5,000 to do all the editing. The editing's the hard part, especially for guys like you, because you probably aren't going to sit in front of the camera and be like, here are the 5 ways that blah. I try to get my team to not do that. Instead, just film me while we're running around doing stuff. So you're at like, I don't know, $5,000 a month for that. Twitter, I think you should do yourself to start. I use an app called Tweet Hunter. I think it's really useful. I schedule it all in Tweet Hunter. Some people tweet real time. That distracts my brain. I can't do that. And then the newsletter, we use Beehive. I am an investor in that, so there's a bias there, but I love that platform. I started on Substack. Beehive makes it super easy. You could write your own newsletters, or you guys probably all have copywriters, right? So they would pretty easily be able to shift to newsletter writing. But the problem with newsletter writing is you can't go viral with newsletter writing. So I'd start with one of the platforms you could go viral with and then funnel people to your business, your newsletter, your whatever.
One of the things we were talking about in the traffic acquisition kind of pod that we had earlier today was, at least for me, I'm looking out and I want to invest in fewer channels that I feel like are going to be around in like 10 years or have a higher likelihood.
So not Threads.
Yeah, not Threads. So, I mean, who here has invested a bunch of time into a channel and it's just the reach on it has almost completely gone away? Show of hands.
What
Wow,
channels? What channels? Shout it out.
YouTube.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Clubhouse, yeah.
Well, Clubhouse. Do you remember it? Anyway, but like
that.
some of those things that, because for me, that's super frustrating. I feel like you're always playing the catch up, build something here and it disappears. Yeah. So if you had, I mean, you're on a lot of channels right now. If you were just going to double, triple down, narrow your scope and go on just 2 or 3, what are your favorites in terms of longevity and actually being effective in 10 years or 5 years? Do 5 years.
Well, I think the only thing you can count on is your email list. I don't have to preach that to this audience. Yeah, right? So I might care less about the platform than I do on building the email list. And so I think I would flip that question and I would say, where could I get the most amount of attention for the least amount of time and the highest ROI with my skill set, which might be writing, or maybe it's video, or maybe it's filming really cool, funky e-com content. And so knowing that, the answer is probably TikTok or Twitter, or maybe YouTube Shorts. TikTok, Twitter, or YouTube Shorts. I would pick one of those. And I would assume that at some point I will be irrelevant and nobody will care about me. And because I assume that, I will want to take as many people as possible off the platforms into my own audience, because I could actually sell that at some point. So that would be my answer. And I thought TikTok was going to go away, but it's still here, so.
Yeah. We're going to do questions in just a minute, but thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you for talking. I love geeking out about this kind of stuff. I always love talking to you. And what things, I mean, you're kind of doing this, you're mission-based. Entrepreneurship's important to you. You've got a lot of strong beliefs about things. What would you love to challenge people with or ask them to do in their business and their lives kind of as people leave here today?
Oh, thanks for that. Andrew's also great. You guys already know this, but anytime I go to invest in like an e-com company, I run it by you, and you're always so giving with your information. You helped me get into like a great e-com tax deal. You told me no on a couple bad ones. So I think you guys have a really cool community, and I've been lucky to be a part of it for like many years now. Maybe 5 or 6, or that's wild.
Don't thank me until the returns come through on those investments.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a little proving grounds.
From a few for sure. So I would be remiss if I guess I didn't say this. There's 2 opportunities that I can't shut up about, and if you follow me on the internet, you guys already know this. I think owners of businesses are fucking crazy to not do acquisitions, and I don't mean PPC. I mean, you guys should be buying your competitors, and you should be buying your vendors, and you guys should be buying satellite companies to your main orbit, or horizontal acquisitions. And when I learned this game, it's such an unlock. People are like, "How do you have a portfolio of 100 million in revenue?" I'm like, "I didn't build it. I bought it. And nobody even knows the names of those companies, and nobody can turn them off or turn them on because they're not tied to the internet." And so if I was you all, I would be buying companies left and right. And why I would do it first selfishly is because businesses as an asset class, e-com and online are different. You guys know we saw Thrasio and all those guys make crazy stupid deals. But the businesses that support your main companies, there are so many to be bought. It's wild. And you guys are already level 1 operators because you're like the top 2% if you look at it from just a total revenue perspective. So why would you go obsess on buying individual clients when you could just buy a whole stadium of them? I've never understood that. The problem is, I think, it takes some upfront time to learn acquisitions, whereas you guys already know the game of individual client-by-client acquisition. But if I could tell you how most people become billionaires, it's not through mastering PPC. It's just not. And it's also not through email lists. It is by and large through acquiring assets because you have an unfair perspective in some segment that's hyper niche, and you know how to turn that business around. So you buy for pennies on the dollar, you incubate it into your ecosystem, and then you grow it. I mean, that's how the richest man in the world made all of his money, which is the CEO of LVMH. He bought a bunch of these businesses and combined them into a conglomerate. So that's the selfish reason why is like, I think that's the best way to make money, period. That's why I won't shut up about it. The mission-based reason is, if you guys haven't looked at this already, go and Google Japan and small business crisis. And you'll basically see that in Japan right now, there are so many businesses that are not being transitioned to the next generation or sold that they worry about an economic recession just because business owners will get too old and they won't be able to serve these small businesses anymore. I think the same thing is happening in the US, and we are maybe 10 to 20 years out from that, but that happens in the blink of an eye. And I also think that it is not right that we have the big guys own everything and we don't own our local community. And so my pushback on all of you is, I think you should learn acquisitions. I think you should buy diversified businesses to the main business you have in case your PPC or your channels stop working. And I think most people will never do that because it will take you a few months to get all the knowledge to do it. But then once you look back, it's really hard to be poor ever again.
Head over at contrarianthinking.co. Sign up for all the updates and newsletter from Codie. Give her a follow on the socials. Very smart and spicy takes all the time.
Thank you.
Codie, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Round of applause, please, for Codie.